Hello and welcome to the Bee Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast. I have Rich Bracken with us from Kansas City today. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Me too, me too. And we had a good old quick little chit chat pre-show, and I feel like we're just going to be flowing, and the conversation is going to be quite formless because it sounds like we've got a lot of synergies and a lot to discuss. You
Mhm.
are a keynote speaker, executive coach focused on emotional intelligence. We all need more of that in this world at this point in time.
Yes.
Yeah, so emotional intelligence, leadership, and executive presence. I am
Mhm.
really intrigued about this executive presence because I was saying to you pre-show, it's coming up a lot in the podcasts and the people I'm talking to, and the need for it
Mhm.
more and more. And I'd love your thoughts on it. You're also the host of the EnRich Your Soul podcast, which is
Mhm.
relaunching come January 2026. So look out
Yes.
for the relaunch of the EnRich Your Soul podcast. And predominantly, you work with companies to improve culture, communications, and performance through evidence-based EQ practices. When you booked in for the pod, and I asked you what's one unique insight or lived experience when it comes to life, leadership, and/or business, you said how the power of emotional intelligence is helping leaders and companies.
Mhm.
Tell us about your journey and tell us how you came into this space and everything that you're doing in terms of EQ and in particular this executive presence.
Yeah, so the journey of EQ, which also let me pause and say I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me on the show. Yeah, the journey to my knowledge and acceptance and now sharing of EQ and how it really transforms people and organizations actually came out of an unfortunate trip to the hospital for me. So I was working at a law firm as a business development manager, was very successful, working very hard, but also, very successful on the outside, but not very successful on the inside. And so one day I find myself suffering all the symptoms of what seemed to be a heart attack.
Oh,
And so I drove myself to the emergency room, went through all the tests and everything else, and the doctor comes in and says, "Good news, you're not having a heart attack, but bad news, you're having a massive, massive panic attack.
oh,
Let's talk about your lifestyle. Let's talk about what you're doing." And I was talking about my sleep or lack thereof. I was exercising, but that really was masking the problems that were boiling underneath with anxiety and stress and sleep deprivation. And so he taught me about this book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which is actually sitting behind me. And he said, this is the only time I'm going to prescribe something that's not a medication. It's actually a book. He said, I'm studying this book. I obviously have a very high stress job as an ER doc. And I've started putting some of these practices into play. And it's really helped me with my stress, my anxiety, and my performance. Because when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's the understanding of our emotions and how we manage them, but also how we understand and manage the emotions of others. And when it came to him, it was really the same problem that I was suffering. I wasn't managing myself very well. I wasn't aware of my emotions. I wasn't taking care of myself. And so that's what got me into that position. So once I started reading the book, putting the practices in play, I saw that same kind of change in my life. I was more balanced. I was a better communicator. I was a better leader. I was a better teammate. I was a better husband, father. All these different things improved by just paying attention, slowing down, looking for triggers and identification of stressors in my life. And so, me being me, my dream job since I was 5 years old was to be a game show host. So I have this abundant personality,
I love
I
it.
have this knowledge, and I have this passion for helping people. And it's just been ingrained in me since I was a child. And so I thought, I'll try this subject. I'll put together a presentation. I'll submit it to a conference because I want to share this with the world. Like I don't want to keep this to myself. And that started my 6 year, now 8 year journey speaking. I was speaking on the side for 6 years. And then 2 years ago, I went out on my own, started my own consultancy company. I do, like you said, the keynoting, I do executive coaching, primarily around emotional intelligence. But I've seen now all this transformation. And finally, the full circle moment is that the book that I read to get into this, I'm now the brand ambassador for that company. So I'm representing the company that truly saved my life and helped me change my direction as a professional and a personal as
Did
well.
they approach you, or like how did that come full circle in terms of the book
So
and you being connected? Like how did that work?
I'm a firm believer in serendipity and being in the right place at the right time. And so I was talking with a friend of mine who was actually going on her podcast, and something came up about emotional intelligence. She goes, "Oh, I didn't even think about it. I need to introduce you to my friend David. He actually works with Talent Smart EQ, which is the company that wrote the book. You two would totally hit it off." And so he and I start talking. We get on a Zoom call one day, and I'm sharing how I'm, talking about this in my keynotes and sharing this in my presentations and writing content about it. And he was talking about something around revenue generation for the company. I said, "Well, you should just hire me. Like, I'm out there talking about you anyway.
I'll
Well,
be
how can we
there.
figure out a partnership?"
Yeah.
And so it was me not only being in the right place at the right time, but having the confidence of saying, I'm the right person to help you do that. And so there wasn't really a natural fit from a position standpoint with their company. I said, "Well, why don't you just call me a brand ambassador? I'll talk about it, send companies your way for training," and off we went. So it's been about a year and a half now that we've had that position in place. And so really, truly, it was me just raising my hand saying, "I love what you do and I want to talk more about it and I want to partner with you all."
How cool. How cool. So tell us, how do you define emotional intelligence? Like, how is it defined?
Yeah. So it is truly the identification of your own emotions, how you're managing them, and then how you're being more socially aware with people, how you're paying attention to them, and then what you're doing to maintain and grow those relationships. And so, really, what it boils down to is the fact that most adults, as professionals, especially, and executives and CEOs, as we go up the ranks in our companies, our emotional intelligence naturally drops because we're a little bit more separated from the day-to-day work. We have more pressure on us and more responsibility because of all the leveling up of your position. And so when we have that combined with the fact that I think it's around 15% of people actually are emotionally intelligent while 90% think they are. So there's a
Really?
big gap. And oh yeah, there's a big gap between the understanding of what it is and the actual application of it. It really is a massive need and opportunity for organizations across the world because it is the number one thing that not only impacts your day-to-day activity, up to 60% of your performance is due to your emotional intelligence or lack thereof. But also the nice thing is that your IQ peaks at a certain point early on and doesn't change, but your EQ, your emotional intelligence, can be enhanced every single day. So when I talk with law firms or I talk with sales teams or talk with CEOs or execs or C-suite, and I tell them, like, I don't care where you rank on this, and we have a test that you can take to see where you rank on the emotional intelligence scale, you can improve it. So if you're at a 30 or a 40 out of 100, you actually can move up the scale with the right activities and the right, things put in place. So it's a really phenomenal topic to talk about. And so I've got the keynote that I do on emotional intelligence, but then, the final fun fact about me is that I used to be a national touring DJ. Played over in the UK for a little bit. So now I have a keynote that blends emotional intelligence and music, and I actually take my turntables on stage and I'm teaching emotional intelligence. We're also singing and dancing and having a party at the same time.
Oh, how fun. Gosh, you are like, you've got it all going on, don't you? And you said you're like an idea generator. I can see it. I can see. Tell me, just on the emotional intelligence and that stat around 15% and 90%.
Mhm.
Emotional intelligence, it starts from, excuse me, being connected in within, right? And even enriching your soul. Like, I'm all around that soulful, interconnection of mind, body, and soul.
Mhm.
You have to start there. Like, is that part of what
Oh,
emotional
yes.
intelligence is all about? Like, you can't find it externally. It's not something that you can just buy or borrow, or you've got to actually do the work. And I guess it takes me to this, executive presence piece, right? Because the only
Mhm.
way that we can truly understand where we're at in terms of ourselves emotionally and what we need to evolve or what we need to work on is that ability to be able to sit with oneself and that presence. Can you tell us a little bit about that interconnection and, am I right in saying that emotional intelligence starts within? I mean, I fundamentally, from my own experience, know it is, but yeah, I just love, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It does start with you, and that's why when I teach emotional intelligence, when it does have a direct correlation to executive presence, it is that self-awareness piece. Emotional intelligence to me is made up of self-awareness and self-management, which is up to you. And then there's the social awareness and the relationship management, which is more the social acumen. But when we start with ourselves, what our self-awareness is, how are you tuned into your emotions? What are you feeling? How are you properly identifying your emotions? And I talk about, the primary colors of emotions is what we typically communicate: fine, happy, sad, frustrated, stressed, those very basic words. But when we put deeper descriptions to them, or we actually acknowledge those emotions, because some people in society and especially in business don't want to admit their emotions or don't want to be vulnerable in that moment, or feel like if they say, well, I'm feeling a little sad today, or I'm feeling a little depressed, or I'm a little over anxious, they feel like it's a sign of vulner or of
Weakness.
lower performance.
Yeah.
They're being too vulnerable, they're being weak. And so by doing that, it actually is showing more strength because you're admitting where your vulnerability is, but you're also aware of it to do something different about it. Now, when you're aware of your emotions, that's fine, but what are you doing with them? So I mean, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be frustrated, it's okay to be anxious, but then what are you doing to change that? And by identifying the emotion, you can also identify the reaction that you have with it. And what I always teach people is that activity, is your reaction to that emotion, your favorite version of yourself? Is that the version that you're proud to put out in the world? Because if it's not, you have the ability to change that. So I'll use myself as the example. I thought I was doing a good job and I was very proud of my work and thought, oh, people will like me because I'm doing good work. But my self-awareness and understanding how stressed out I actually was and how tired I was pushing that aside. I wasn't acknowledging those things. So my self-management was actually very low. I've always been very high on social awareness because I'm a high empath. So I'm very attuned to what you need. I'm very much going to listen to what you have to say, but I wasn't listening to myself. And that was limiting and actually destroying my ability to succeed and to move up properly because I wasn't properly acknowledging or taking care of my emotions for me.
Do you think people see through that as well? Like in terms of like I know when I haven't self-managed myself or I think we oscillate, right? We're not always able to be up here. Like we have our moments where we dip and it's like that it comes back to that self-awareness piece and the emotional intelligence of why am I down here? What do I need to do to get myself back into, thriving optimally, etc.
Hmm.
Quite often when it comes to this self-awareness, other people can see it. Like, I mean, I know when I was going through my own version of your panic attack, I
Hmm.
look back now and I'm like, wow, I was really not a well person. And,
Hmm.
people will quite often say to me these days, oh, you look so whole, you look different. And I'm like, it's kind of, and for me, you think you're doing a great job. Others can
Hmm.
see what's going on.
Right.
Like, what's
Yeah,
your, mm,
I feel like it's the same situation that if you leave a lunch meeting and you have a piece of spinach in your teeth, like you think you're fine, but other people can see it. They recognize the weakness. They see what's going on from the outside in, and we're trying to convey this smoke and mirrors act of, oh no, I'm fine. Everything is fine and I've got everything under control. But to a point, like you can't hide it after a while. And people will be able to see through it. And it's not just hitting the bottom of the barrel and hitting your lows, but it's also how
excuse
you
me.
exude your confidence. And that's where executive presence, that's where that tie is. So if you think about being confident and self-assured and understanding where your vulnerabilities are, but knowing that you can act differently, that's self-belief. And that is the key foundation of executive presence. So if you're showing up in a room and delivering a message to a team or giving a sales presentation or giving a town hall presentation or just conveying communication within your organization, if you don't believe in yourself and you're not portraying that confidence, that gravitas in the conversation, the message is going to fall flat. It's going to be unheard. It's going to be not acted on. So if you are really more in tune with your emotions and you understand where you're strong and where you're weak and work on those opportunities of those weaknesses and enhance those, it actually puts you in a better position to be successful as you move up the ladder, as you move through the organization and as you grow yourself as an executive, a thought leader, a presence within a room. All of that comes back to how you're managing your emotional intelligence, which is a key factor of your executive presence and how you show up.
Yeah, it's really fascinating you call that out. And the fact you called out this outside in, I'm all around, from the clients and businesses that I work with, it's that inside out transformation. It comes back to starting within here, right? But yet
Hmm.
we've been trained and conditioned, if you like, to have this outside in philosophy or approach. Work hard, don't show your vulnerability, do this, do that, like
Hmm.
material success, like all of that sort of thing. Do you, like in terms, coming back to the start again, like, do you think that we still have a long way to go in terms of switching it around so it is more inside out approach versus what we've always known as leadership, etc. I mean, it's more and more becoming a conversation, right? Like similarly to
Mhm.
like burnout, it's been there for a very long time. Uh, but it's been quite often just a quick fix. And so I guess where
Right.
I'm going with this is how big our opportunity right here, right now, given like the world we're in and the complexity, but also the rapid change we're in. Are you
Mhm.
seeing this absolute? Are we at a crisis point's the wrong word, but are we at a critical point in time when it comes to leadership where we do need to stop and actually lead from the inside out?
I think yes. I shy away maybe from calling it a critical, like a crisis moment to your point. I think
Yeah,
it's a critical moment, but I think it's also, and not to drop AI into the conversation, but I think so
yeah,
many organizations that are now relying on AI, if they don't align their passion and their direction on AI with their alignment with EQ internally,
yeah.
there's a potential for disaster. Because when I tell corporations like, yeah, you go for it, on the AI side, like whatever you can do to find efficiencies. But what that actually does for your organization is frees up more time for emotional intelligence investment and for people to become more aligned, a little bit more balanced and foundational within themselves. Because I'm now thinking out loud an idea that I would like to try with an organization, but give them a company-wide emotional intelligence exam, front to back, top to bottom. Let's score the entire organization, and then if you took that score, let's just say on average it's 72. So if your organization is, growing by 2.5% a year, and your organization is at a 72 from an emotional intelligence standpoint, I'd be fascinated to see what that does to your profits, your revenue, your innovation, your client service, because all of those things are impacted by emotional intelligence and how people interact. So if you invested, or an organization invested in emotional intelligence for an entire year, started implementing the tactics, started implementing the strategies, and letting leaders be vulnerable and become more whole and raise their emotional intelligence individually and then organizational wide, what that could do for an organization is tremendous.
I agree.
Because again, the key factors of all of those things: innovation, alignment with AI, retention or lack thereof, company culture, sales, all of those things are critical, and they're critically based in emotional intelligence. So, what would happen? And now maybe we're thinking of a live case study right here and now. So, if there's an organization listening right now that you would like to try this, let me know.
Yeah.
Let's make a test case out of this. But at the end of the day, I think there's a heightened awareness around the need for it. But I also think there's this, we'll just call it this misnomer that it is a soft skill. Because anytime this comes up, we're like, oh well, if I talk with a company that wants to book me for a keynote, they're like, well, we don't typically book soft skill conversations. I'm like, there's no more critical skill than this.
Yeah,
It's
it
not a
drives me
soft skill.
crazy.
Yeah. So organizations that realize that it's critical, understand that there's data that supports the need to invest in study this and train it, and that they can see the benefits on the back end. That's where I think the turn will happen.
Mm.
So I think we're at a crossroads, a critical crossroads of, do you want your organization to continue going down this sped up path of business with AI without emotional intelligence, and let's hope that things don't fracture? Or would you like to make your company more sound at the same time, and you're increasing those client relationships, you're closing better sales, you have a better company culture, you're actually being more innovative along the same way of adapting AI as well? Because let's face it, people are still nervous. As much as we talk about it now, people are still nervous about the impact of AI and how it's going to impact their jobs and their relationships and the things that they do in their day-to-days. So there's just this necessity now more than ever to focus on emotional intelligence, especially in the age of AI.
Yeah, it's so true. And I wrote down hustle performance, like in terms of that hustle way of doing things. It is not sustainable. Like people are like we're burning out. There's a lot happening here. I had a question
Mhm.
and I've just lost my chain of thought. Don't you hate that? It'll come back to me, but
That's okay.
it was
If it
around.
comes up, just spit it out and we'll go with it.
Yeah, but it was around this hustle performance versus emotional intelligence. And I think that is a new
Mhm.
form of performance in terms of, it's you can still be a high performer but
Mhm.
you can have so much more. And it's just come back to me actually, because we
Okay.
talk a lot about psychological safety, etc.
Mm.
But I'd love your thoughts on this, because I think that it's beyond psychological safety, even. I think high emotional intelligence enables all aspects of that ability to feel safe, to feel empowered, to feel engaged. Do you know
Mhm.
what I'm saying here? Like, and I'd love your
Absolutely.
thoughts on this, because we talked a lot about psychological safety, like as a big buzzword's the wrong thing, but how do we ensure there's psychological safety? I'm like, it's more than that. It's way
Mhm.
bigger than just a psychological safety practice in an organization.
Yeah, and I love the term psychological safety, and I think it needs to be talked about as much as possible with organizations because number one, to truly have a psychologically safe environment within an organization, there's a lot of things that have to be fixed and changed. You don't change to a psychologically safe organization overnight. It just doesn't happen. Even if you've had a neutral culture where everybody's just kind of doing their thing, to create a psychologically safe environment means that you truly do have an open door policy and a non-judgmental policy where people can come and talk to their leaders, give them feedback, share ideas, do those things that they know they can share without being judged or criticized or ridiculed or shunned aside within an organization. I myself witnessed that. I had a great idea in a former job and I went to my boss to share that idea with her, and I had done all this research, prepared all these talking points, came up with a case for it, and really talked about the value of what it would provide. And she literally said, absolutely not. And shut it down, said it was a ridiculous idea, said it was a waste of resources. I literally never took an idea to her ever again because I didn't feel psychologically safe. I didn't, there was never a tell me more about it. There were no follow up questions. She didn't seem to even have a care about it. Maybe you didn't want to do it, but you don't have to say absolutely not. You could say, let's keep this, that maybe let's continue to work on it and see if it comes up as an opportunity in the future. There's no guarantee, there's no promise, but there's also not, you're not shutting the door. But I'm one of those people that generates ideas on the daily. You and I talked about that. So to shut down someone who has ideas, and I'm not saying all my ideas are perfect, but what ideas do come up that are good, I'm not bringing them to a non-psychologically safe environment. I'm just
No,
not going to do it.
no.
And so again, I think it's so important for leaders to create that psychologically safe environment so that no matter where you are in the organization, especially junior people that are coming in with fresh eyes on things, or somebody who's working in IT that sees a potential problem that could be solved or an opportunity that could be seized because they're literally looking at this day in and day out. If they don't feel like they can go to the higher ups or share it in a team meeting, you may be missing out on a huge opportunity to change, innovate, come up with a new service or a product just because you're not listening to people and you're not providing that trusting environment. You're shooting yourself in the foot. It's doing the organization no good whatsoever to not have that in place.
Which is why for me the EI, the EQ, that is so critical, because quite often, and this happens with certain leaders where they're blockers. They're blocking. You've got something, they can see something in you that they don't have, and they don't know how
Mm-hmm.
to actually tune back into themselves. So rather than let you flourish and thrive and, come up with all these ideas and, I guess evolve, the
Mm-hmm.
tendency is to block. And that's that
Right.
resistance to actually having to do the work
Mm-hmm.
on oneself again. And I see that in leadership, and I see that in businesses where it's like, oh, hang on a sec, or you'll get the brief where the team aren't performing, or this isn't happening and that's not happening, and you have a conversation with that leader, and you straight away like go, no, no, it's not. Quite immediately it's not the team that's the issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like you maybe have talked to my least two favorite bosses before this interview because a separate boss, I had this exact same problem. This person literally in her email to the organization when I got hired said that they landed a rock star, somebody who was, an idea generator, somebody who was very savvy, somebody who was very engaging, somebody who was very personable, all these different compliments about me. But those were actually the undoing of our relationship. So when I was building rapport in one location and really thriving and sharing ideas, and the people that I was working with loved the ideas, this person all of a sudden turned on me.
Mhm.
because she was, and I felt like it was because she wasn't as outgoing. She wasn't as well liked by some of these people. She wasn't as savvy and engaging. She was a lot colder than I am. And all of a sudden, it went from celebrating my rock star persona, and I'm not overly, I'm not over the top too much, especially, ignore the bedazzled stormtrooper helmet, but I
I
know
love
my
all of this
limits.
vibe. It's great.
Right. I know I've got personality everywhere back here, but I know my limits. I'm not trying to cause fights or cause problems or create animosity. And so instead of just coming out and saying this, or, to your point, looking within herself and saying, well, maybe there are things about him that I'm envious of that I need to enhance myself, all of a sudden she turned on me. And it became a very tense situation, and it wound up me being fired from the organization because there was this resentment, or because there were these issues and she didn't like what I was doing. But at the end of the day, I truly felt that way. Now, did I ever get that explanation? No, but I truly felt that I was being held to task for things that were natural talents of mine that weren't exhibited in her, and there was animosity because of that.
And Rich, how do you like? I mean, that happens in organizations a lot, right? And then you lose great talent,
Mhm.
and then there's these individuals or leaders that stay in their roles and they cause the block, they cause the friction, and yet
Mhm.
they still exist.
Right.
And it then stops or prevents, if you like, the innovation, the ability for the business to evolve, grow, expand,
Mhm.
flourish, be more successful from a results perspective.
Mhm.
What do you think is the biggest opportunity there to, I guess, to what's the word I'm looking for here? To basically to basically come in and switch it up, if you like, because that
Mhm.
we're always going to see those leaders. So how do you see emotional intelligence
Oh
playing
yeah.
a role in circuit breaking? It was the word I was looking for. Circuit breaking
Right.
these sorts of situations, because we need less of these and we need more of the yes and the improvisation, the yes and sure, something can be
Mhm.
poo-pooed down the track or whatever, but we need to be all encouraging one another and growing as
Mhm.
one, fail fast, like all iterate, all of that sort
Right.
of stuff. So yeah, tell us what you
Right.
think about that.
Yeah, so I love two things that you said there. Circuit breaking, yes, because I felt she was quite robotic. So there needs to be that circuit breaking of those robotic, cold, non-emotional, intelligent leaders, because they are causing problems. They are causing blocks. They
Yeah.
are causing downfalls of innovation and opportunity. The other thing that I love that you said is improvisation. I tell people all the time, the best thing I did in my career was I went out and voluntarily took an improvisation class at a comedy troupe.
Same.
It's one of the most awkward things you will ever do, but it
100%.
also is one of the most powerful,
Yeah.
because you can improvise the yes and theory, like yes and tell me more, as opposed to shutting down an idea, because the whole premise of improvisation is that you don't want to shut an idea down. So you watch any improvisational skit, nobody says, "Oh, that's a dumb idea," or "No, we're not doing
No.
that." They say, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm imagining this with you." They roll with the idea, and that's the whole point of it. And I think, we chatted a little bit ago about the idea that you're having to turn organizations from this old school mindset to this
Mm,
more emotionally intelligent
mm,
mindset. And so I think it comes in a few layers. So I'm imagining this former boss of mine. And I think, one, she would have to see the data of why it's important. Because to come in and say emotional intelligence will help your leadership, blah, 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 organizations need to see proof. Our company provides that. So we have all kinds of data and research that says it's proven that this works for organizations to change these things. So, number one, I think you have to change people's minds. And then it's the behavior. It's the self awareness around why they are the way they are, and they have to fix those things, and it's up to them to do that. But it's bringing in this new conversation and culture around, if we work abundantly, if we talk abundantly, if we don't worry about who gets credit for what, if we thrive as an organization. I think about sports teams all the time. There are people that play great supporting roles that are on successful teams because they don't care about the credit. They're not worried about who's scoring the goal or the touchdown
that's
or
so true.
getting the bag. They're not worried about those things. They want to win championships. They want to be successful overall. Sure, they want to have fun in the process. And yeah, it would be nice if they scored a goal. But at the same time, that's not the most critical thing. Those are great support players. But when we get into organizations where we are so worried about who's getting credit, we're worried about us not getting credit, we're worried about who's doing what, we're trying to keep too much control and keep everything too locked down, you're suffocating your organization from the success that it has the potential for.
Mm.
So if you imagine two organizations, one that is top heavy driven, we're going to do this the way we want to do this, and you all are just going to go act out the things we tell you to do, that's organization one. They're going to be very limited because they're low in emotional intelligence. Or you have organization two that says, yes, there are going to be processes in place, but at the same time, let's have some ideas. Let's talk about things. Let's talk about ways we can grow. If there is something that you see, it's almost like when you see in airports, if you see something, say something. If you see an opportunity, say something. If you see a problem, say something. If you see something that could be more efficient, say something. Because in organizations, everybody has eyes on everything. As a leader, or as a CEO, or as a VP, you can't possibly have eyes on everything that goes on a day-to-day basis. It just doesn't happen. But if you build that trust level in your company to say, look, I want to help us all. I want us all to succeed, and I will listen to whatever comes up. Can't make any guarantees that things will happen or happen immediately. But if we don't open those doors to conversation and the idea that we all want to succeed together, then you're never going to have people step up and say, hey, look, I have an idea.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, that is what transforms companies. Or maybe it's a minor change that over the course of time saves the company money or makes the company money.
Yeah.
That you never know unless you have those conversations.
I totally agree. And that's when you get into that collective flow in terms of, you're ideating, it's that creativity, things become effortless, abundance follows when it comes to like if everyone is engaged, if everyone's in that collective yes and, kind of way of being and doing,
Mhm.
we get that whole interconnected, ecosystem as well. I've got two final questions for you.
Sure.
Enrich Your Soul. And I know that's your
Mhm.
podcast.
Mhm.
But just tell us a little bit about, because I'm like I said to you pre-show, and, for me, going through my own kind of, like I said, form of burnout and identity, turning point, etc. One of the big things for me was having to step back and enrich my soul and reconnect with my soul. Where did Enrich Your Soul, how did that come about? Where did that come from?
So it's a little bit of a play on words. Obviously, my name is plugged in there intentionally, and I was
Oh,
trying to play
yes.
off the idea of enriching people because I think when you break it down, like I mentioned it earlier, I love and thrive on helping people.
Yeah.
And my grandfather told me to leave people better than you found them. And
Yeah.
so if I can do that with people through my podcast and I do solo episodes or interviews with individuals in different spaces, if my content helps somebody, helps one person, then it's done its job. So
Yeah.
I want to enrich people. And I think the soul aspect comes from the idea that, at the time that I launched it, I was really starting to get heavier into social media but the more I got into it, the more I saw very surface level aesthetic
Oh, so
content.
good to hear
I
that.
saw very fake things, and
Yeah.
that's just not who I am. I don't want to do that. And you've mentioned it earlier, like you have to really dig in, whether you're a high performing individual, whether you're a CEO, whether you're an entry level employee, whether you're somebody just in university or coming up in the ranks, you have to be who you are deep down inside. And those that live by this ever chased carrot, and you mentioned the races earlier, like if you're just running in circles trying to figure out what to do because you're constantly chasing the next trend or the next thing or the next thing you see on social media that you've got to, oh, I figured out how to be like this person, but now this person is showing up better. I got to go chase them now. You're never going to get to a point where you're happy. And I've fallen into that trap too, where I wanted to
Same.
be like that speaker, and then that
Same.
speaker was being outshined by that speaker. So I wanted to go be like that speaker. And instead saying, well, what about me? The constant is me. So what can I do for myself to dig into my soul to really be better for me? And therefore, kind of like we were talking about with emotional intelligence, if I'm better for me, I'm better for everyone else. So it's not a selfish thing. It's me wanting to provide the better life for myself, but by subsequently, I improve my presence around people. So enrich your soul is really just getting to the core of who you are. I talk, yes, I have fun content and I have a great time with it. But at the same time, I want people to understand that self exploration, that deep dive on who you are, is critical. I've been through it myself. I know that it
Agree.
works. I know that it's important and it has tremendous value. Is it terrifying at times? Absolutely. Because you got to dig into some stuff that maybe you've pushed aside for a while. But it is important and absolutely critical that you do that kind of work. Therefore, you can move forward with better performance and better happiness.
Oh, so true. I love it. And I've been terming it the soulful high flow conscious leader. So, that soulful is that
Mhm.
presence and that intuition. The high flow is
Mhm.
the performance where we shine our brightest by feeling and performing our best, not just as an individual, but as a collective. And
Right.
conscious is conscious, is being consciously aware, right?
Hmm.
And leadership is leading for your people. And I think that leading for
Right.
yourself, leading for your people. But I love everything you talked about just then because it does start with us. And I think we've got,
Mhm.
it's really interesting. They're about to ban social media for people under the age of 16 here in Australia, and it's causing a real
Wow.
uproar. But when you go onto social media and even LinkedIn and things like that, it's just like you say, it's vanilla, it's surface, it's like,
Hmm.
and I go on it and then I'm like, I go off it. I'm
Right.
inconsistent, but I'm inconsistent for a reason because I'm like, I don't, if I go on and just I have to be authentic and intentional in anything I put out there because that's just
Mhm.
coming back to me and my own human emotional intelligence and doing things soulfully. And I think that we need more of that in this world. We need more of that in leadership, in life, in business, and
Mhm.
we are happier, we are more fulfilled, and anything is possible. Like the possibilities are endless when we're in this space and place.
Right.
Rich, what would be one piece of advice you'd give somebody or give your younger self or yourself in your previous situation where you had a boss like that? Now that you
Mm.
have had all this emotional intelligence training, you have evolved, you've reconnected with yourself. If
Mhm.
you were that rich again and you knew all that you know now, how would you respond differently to those bosses or that boss of yours?
I think I'll keep the answer short, but I have to answer both. To me, I heard two things in there. One, I think the message I would give my younger self is to believe in myself more consistently.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm trying not to get choked up because I just glanced over and I saw I've been working on a piece and I have a picture of myself from seventh grade sitting over to the side. And I can see it on my desktop right now. And that was probably one of the lowest times in my life. My son is a seventh grader, so it's been very emotional for me this year.
yeah.
Um, because I was a mess back then. I was insecure. I did not believe in myself. I was bullied quite a bit. And so I fine-tuned this self-deprecation and this lack of self-belief, and I've just kind of struggled through that for a long, long time.
Mm,
And I think we all, and I could say that even I battle that every now and then in small doses where maybe I, am a little harder on myself than I should be, or I don't
yeah,
believe in myself as much as I should. So I think the now me would tell the then me, like, be proud of who you are always. Believe in yourself always. You're worth whatever you think you're worth. You determine your worth, nobody else does. And if somebody else doesn't see your worth, they can't afford you, and that's emotionally, that's financially. Don't ever back down on your worth. And I think it was I'm a big Peloton fan, and Robin Arzon I think one time said you should know your worth, raise it by 10%, and then add tax. And you should always live by that. You should always be proud of who you are and proud of your value. And I, for a lot of my life, I was not, and it took me a long time to realize that. And it's still a work in progress, but I'm prouder of myself now than I've ever been. But I think to go to those bosses, I will say in both instances, the boss that didn't like me because of who she was, I never backed down off of who I was, and I never apologized for it. And why it was interesting was that the day that I was fired, I was walking through the office with the director of HR, and people saw me walking with her and started saying, "Well, what's going on?" And I told them what happened. People were livid that I got fired because they wanted me there. They believed in who I was. And so I believed in myself. It was a little bit of a tough moment when I heard the news, but when I saw people yanking their phones up to go scream at somebody because of what was going on, I knew that others saw my worth, and that meant something to me, that I made an
yeah,
impact on them. And to the first boss that said my idea was ridiculous, I did it anyway. And she got mad at me for doing it anyway. But I believed enough in the idea and I believed enough in myself to be able to pull it off. And I will say with a big smile on my face, yeah, I don't condone the rebellious acts within organizations, but sometimes you just have to trust your gut on something. And I did. And yes, I got in a lot of trouble for it. And I will fully say that. But also the person that I did it for wound up closing one of the biggest deals in the company's history. So I'm not going to apologize for that. And
No.
it was a great product. It's and the thing that I created still exists to this day.
Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago.
Incredible.
So so I believed in myself in that moment and I doubled down on myself. And also I had other people believe in me because they worked off hours to help me get it done. So that in of itself was, in hindsight, like probably one of the best moments of my entire career because I truly believed in myself in the face of doubt and threat and trouble and everything else. And I did what I thought was the right thing, and I was right.
I love it. It's so cool. And just reconnecting and having that self-belief and that self-worth. And we're all a
Hmm.
work in progress. Like I'm a continuous
Oh
work in
yes.
progress, and that's part of the evolution of us all, right? Rich, how do we find out more about you? How do we find out more about emotional talent, intelligence? I know the podcast is relaunching in January
Hmm.
2026, but yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so you can find anything and everything on richbracken.com. All my keynote content is on there, my coaching content. I coach executives on executive presence and brand. I also do public speaking coaching as well. So that's all there. Videos, podcasts, even my Spotify. I make great playlists of music for different moods and genres. So if you even need just a music break,
I
head over
have
to
to check it
richbracken.com. You
out.
can find everything there.
Thank you so much, Rich. It's been I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and you've lifted me up, even though I was already lifted up. Like just adding that emotional, that emotional lift for a Tuesday to get through the rest of the week. So thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care. Thanks, Rich.
You too.